Call of Cthulhu, read by Aidan Wright. You asked to explain why I'm afraid of draught of cool air. Why I shiver more than others upon entering a cold room, and seem nauseated and repelled when the chill of evening creeps through the heat of a mild autumn day. There are those who say I respond to cold as others do to a bad odour, and I am the last to deny the impression. What I will do is relate the most horrible circumstances I have ever encountered, and leave it to you to judge whether or not this forms a suitable explanation of my peculiarity. It is a mistake to fancy that horror is associated inextricably with darkness, silence, and solitude, found in the glare of mid-afternoon, in the clangor of a metropolis, and in the teeming mist of a shabby and commonplace rooming house with a prosaic landlady and two stalwart men by my side. In the spring of 1923 I had secured some dreary and unprofitable magazine work in the city of New York, and being unable to pay any substantial rent, began drifting from one cheap boarding establishment to another in search of a room which might combine the qualities of decent cleanliness and durable furnishings of very reasonable price. It soon developed that I had only a choice between different evils, but after a time I came upon a house in West 14th Street which disgusted me much less than the others I had sampled. The place is a 4-story mansion of brown stone dating apparently from the late 40s, and fitted with woodwork and marble whose stained and sullied splendour argued a descent from high levels of tasteful opulence. In rooms large and lofty and decorated with impossible paper and ridiculously ornate stucco cornices, there lingered a depressing mustiness and a hint of some obscure cookery. But the floors were clean, the linen tolerably regular, and the hot water, not too often cold, turned off, so that I came to regard it as at least a bearable place to hibernate till one might really live again. The landlady, a slatternly, almost bearded Spanish woman named Herrero, did not annoy me with gossip or with criticism of a late burning electric light in my third floor front hall room, and my fellow lodgers were as quiet and uncommunicative as one might desire, being mostly Spaniards a little above the coarsest and crudest grade. Only the din of streetcars in the thoroughfare below proved a serious annoyance. I had been there about 3 weeks when the first odd incident occurred. One evening at about 8, I heard a splattering on the floor and became suddenly aware that I had been smelling the pungent odour of ammonia for some time. Looking about, I saw that the ceiling was wet and dripping, soaking, apparently proceeding from the corner on the side towards the street. Anxious to stop the matter at its source, I hastened to the basement to tell the landlady, and was assured by her that the traveller would quickly be set right. "Doctor Monos," she cried as she rushed upstairs ahead of me, "he has spilled his chemicals. He is too sick for doctor himself, sicker and sicker all the time, but he will not have others for help. He is very queer in his sickness. All day he take funny smelling baths, and he cannot get excited or warm. All his own housework he do. His little room are full of bottles and machines, and he does not work as doctor. But he was great once. My father in Barcelona have heard of him, and only just. Now he fix an arm of the plumber that got hurt of sudden. He never go out, only on roof. And my boy Esteban, he bring him his food and laundry and medicines and chemicals. My God, the sal almanac that man used for them to keep him cool. Mrs. Herrero disappeared up the staircase to the 4th floor, and I returned to my room. The ammonia ceased. I cleaned up what had spilled and opened the window for air. I heard the landlady's heavy footsteps above me. Dr. Manor's I had never heard save for certain sounds as of some gasoline-driven mechanism, since his step was soft and gentle. I wondered for a moment what the strange affliction of this man might be, and whether his obstinate refusal of outside aid were not the result of rather baseless eccentricity. There is, I reflected tritely, an infinitely deal of pathos in the state of an eminent person who has come down in the world. I might have never known Dr. Menez had not been for the heart attack that suddenly seized one forenoon as I sat writing in my room. Physicians had told me of the danger of those spells, and knew there was no time to be lost, so remembering what the landlady had said about the invalid's help of an injured workman, I dragged myself upstairs and knocked feebly at the door above mine. My knock was answered in good English by a curious voice, some distance to the right, asking my name and business, and these things being stated, there came an opening of the door next to one I had sought. A rush of cool air greeted me. Through the day was one of the hottest of late June. I shivered as I crossed the threshold into a large apartment whose rich and tasteful decorations surprised me in its nest of squalor and seediness. A folding couch now filled its diurnal roll of sofa, and mahogany furniture, sumptuous hangings, old paintings and mellow bookshelves, all bespoke a gentleman's study rather than a boarding-house bedroom. I now saw that the whole room above mine, the little room of bottles and machines, which Mrs. Herrero had mentioned, was merely the laboratory of the doctor, and that his main living quarters lay in a spacious adjoining room, his convenient alcoves and large contiguous bathroom permitted him to hide all dressers and obtrusively utilitarian devices. Dr. Munoz most certainly was a man of birth, cultivation, and discrimination. The figure before me was short but exquisitely proportioned and clad in somewhat formal dress of perfect fit and cut. A high-bred face of masterful, though not arrogant expression was adorned by a short grey full beard, and an aquiline nose which gave a Moorish touch to a physiognomy otherwise dominant Celtiberian. Thick, well-trimmed hair that argued the punctual curls of a barber was parted gracefully above a high forehead, and the whole picture was one of striking intelligence and superior blood and breeding. Nevertheless, as I saw Dr. Munoz in that blast of cool air, I felt a repugnance which nothing in his aspect could justify. Only his lividly inclined complexion and coldness of touch could have afforded a physical basis for this feeling, and even those things should have been excusable considering the man's known invalidism. It might too have been the singular cold that alienated me, for such chilliness was abnormal on so hot a day, and the abnormal always excites aversion and distrust and fear. But repugnance was soon forgotten in admiration, for the strange physician's extreme skill at once became manifest, despite the ice coldness and shakiness of his bloodless-looking hands. He clearly understood my needs at a glance, and ministered to them with a master's deftness, the while reassuring me in a fine modulated but oddly hollow and timbreless voice that all his friends in a lifetime of bizarre experiment devoted to its bafflement and exturbation. Something of the benevolent fanatic seemed to reside in him, and he rambled on almost garrulously as he sounded my chest and mixed a suitable draught of drugs fetched from the smaller laboratory room. Evidently he found the society of a well-born man a rare novelty in this dingy environment, and was moved to accustomed speech as memories of better days surged over him. His voice, if queer, was at least soothing, and I could not even perceive that he breathed as the fluent sentences rolled urbanely out. He sought to distract my mind from my own seizure by speaking of his theories and experiments, and I remember his tactfully consoling me about my weak heart by insisting that will and consciousness are stronger than organic life itself. So if a body frame can be originally healthy and carefully preserved, it may, through a scientific enhancement of these qualities, retain a kind of nervous animation, despite the most serious impairments, defects, or even absences in the battery of specific organs. He might be half-jestingly said, "Some day teach me to live, or at least to possess some kind of conscious existence." Without any heart at all. For his part, he was afflicted with a complication of maladies, requiring a very exact regimen, which included constant cold, and a marked rise in the temperature might, if prolonged, affect him fatally. The frigidity of his habitations of some 55 or 56 degrees Fahrenheit was maintained by an absorption system of ammonia cooling, the gasoline engine of whose pumps I have often heard in my own room below. Relieved of my seizure in this marvellously short while, I left the shivery place, a discipline and the devotee of a gifted recluse. After that, I paid him frequently overcoated calls, listening while he told me of secret researches and almost ghastly results, and trembling a bit when I examined the unconventional, astonishing ancient volumes on his shelves. I was eventually, I may add, almost cured of my disease for all time by his skilful ministrations, believed that these scripted formulae to contain rare psychological stimuli, which might conceivably have similar effects on the substance of a nervous system from which organic pulsations had fled. I was touched by his account of the aged Dr. Torres of Valencia, who assured his early experiments and nursed him through the great illness of 18 years before, whence his present disorders proceeded. No sooner had the venerable practitioner saved his colleagues than he himself succumbed to the grim enemy he had fought. Perhaps the strain had been too great, for Dr. Munoz made it whispery clear, though not in detail, that the method of healing had been most extraordinary, involving scenes and processes not welcomed by the elderly and conservative Galens. As weeks passed, I observed with great regret that my new friend was indeed slowly but unmistakably losing ground physically. As Mrs. Herrero had suggested, the living aspect of his countenance was intensified, his voice became more hollow and indistinct, his muscular motions were less perfectly coordinated, and his mind and will display less resilience and initiative. Of this sad change he seemed by no means unaware, and little by little his expression and conversation took on a gruesome irony, which restored in me something of the subtle repulsion I had originally felt. He developed strange caprices, acquiring fondness for exotic spices and Egyptian incense till his room smelled like the vault of a sepulchred pharaoh in the Valley of Kings. At the same time his demands for cold air increased, and with my aid he amplified the ammonia piping of his room, and modified the temperature as low as 34 or 40 degrees, Friday even as 28 degrees. Bathroom temperature, of course, being less chilled in order that water might not freeze, that chemical processes might not be impeded. The tenant adjoining him complained of icy air from around the connecting door, so I helped him fit heavy hangings to obviate the difficulty. A kind of growing horror outre a morbid cast.